everybody. So I am here today with my friend Dr. Cicely Brantley, and as promised, we are bringing you a video on some things that you can do to kind of help cope and get you through this time of quarantine with the corona apocalypse as we've deemed it. But just during this time when we are all asked to stay at home, as you can see, we are not at home today.
Right.
We wanted to be able to give you some different scenery. I know that everybody's probably tired of seeing four walls, so we wanted you to enjoy this video and enjoy the outside. It is a nice day outside today when we're recording the video. But anyway, so we wanted to bring you some helpful tips on things that you can do just to keep peace in your home, make sure that everybody is not experiencing stress. We know we're going to experience stress on some levels, but how do we minimize that as much as possible during this time? So we're so thankful that you have joined us, that you have tuned in and watched our video today. And so with that, I want to introduce you, Dr. Cicely Brantley.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to start just by asking, we know that obviously kids and teens, their whole entire routine is thrown off. Everybody's routine is thrown off right now, even parents. So with parents being at home, working remotely, and now on top of that, they also are doing homeschool with their kids, you know, because kids are doing distance learning. What are some things that parents can really look out for, you know, in their children and teens during this time of being inside? So if they start to maybe act out in behavioral ways, what are some things that parents can be on the lookout for?
Well, one of the things, I think one of the very first things to think about is the fact that anxiety is really common for adolescents and teenagers in particular in an ideal situation. So in this situation where so much is different than what the kids and the families have been used to, I think the most important thing is to have conversations, to sit down, to ask your children and teens how they're doing, make it age appropriate, of course, but to kind of admit, you know, this is different for me. You know, I'm struggling with this different schedule. What about you? Because sometimes it helps them to open up if they know it's a normal, normal thing to have this different reaction. And then there's been a lot online about keeping the same schedule. And while I agree that structure is needed, I think one of the things that families can do is relax the schedule just a little bit to allow for bonding, to allow for supportive kinds of conversations and activities and fun and sleeping in a little bit. Because listen, rest, as we know, is super important. And if anxiety and questions and even depression should creep up, what we know we need is to rest and rejuvenate our bodies. So I think those are some things that are really important. Allowing the kids some time to just be free and on their own in the yard, if that's possible, that can be a good thing. If you have pets, making sure that they get some playtime in. I know that sometimes gaming can be a little bit controversial in families. Scheduling some of that time in, I think, can be important for teens so that they can have that time where they can just kind of de-stress and have fun and maybe even, interact with some of their friends on the games. So, yeah, just talking about it, making sure to check in on a regular basis is one of the most important things.
And so I know yesterday, I have a 7-year-old, and he got tired of being inside, and he begged. He's like, Mom, I want to go to the store with you. And I'm like, no, baby, I don't want you to go to the store, you know, because obviously parents, you know, we're kind of like, you know, a little worried about our kids getting anything. But he was like, no, I really want to go, you know, and so we just happened to have, you know, an N95 mask from, you know, some do-it-yourself stuff that we were doing, you know, so I said, well, if you want to go out, you have to wear this, you have to stay by me, you can't do this. So he had this whole set of rules of what he could and couldn't do. So what are some ways to talk to your kids about, you know, before they never had to go, when they went outside, they could just go outside and play and be free. But what are some ways to kind of explain to your kids what's going on if now they have to go outside and take all these special measures or precautions and maybe they don't quite understand? What are some good ways to explain to them, you know, whenever like something like this starts to happen?
I think, again, in an age-appropriate way, it's really important to let kids know that while we're healthy and we're thankful for being healthy, we want to be sure to stay healthy. And because this particular virus, there's still so many things that we don't know for sure about it, we want to protect our faces, our nose, mouth, and the places that are most at risk for us actually contracting the virus. We just want to protect those areas, that it's not anything for us to be afraid of, but just to be more aware. And to make sure that we're washing our hands as we're supposed to, not touching our faces, making sure that we wash as much as we can. And I think for kids to know that while it's difficult to stay inside more, it is the healthiest thing to do, not only for us, but for our neighbors, for people around us, obviously for those who are at risk, because of age or other immunocompromised kind of situations. So I think kids, they're resilient.
Yes.
And when we demonstrate the ability to say, hey, I know it's new, I'm having a hard time too, but this is why we're doing it. And after the fact, we'll be so glad that we made these changes, because the quicker we can all make these changes, the quicker we can get back to normal.
Right.
So I think, normalizing it as much as possible, in that I'm showing that, it's something I'm struggling with too. We're in this together, and answering their questions. A lot of times kids may not even know exactly how to ask. So you can kind of offer them, are you wondering why we're having to do all this? Because we can talk about that.
Right.
So that's pretty good as well.
Well, and it kind of brings me to my next thing too, because what are your thoughts on making sure that you're fighting fear with facts? Because we know that there are so many different media outlets out right now, and they're all just sharing so much information, and sometimes it can be information overload, which I know it causes increased anxiety and stress. And so how do people, want to make sure that they're getting those facts and then translating them properly to their kids? Are there any suggestions for that?
One of the first thing I would suggest is making sure that kids get to see the reports of all the people who are recovering.
Right.
Because we hear all of the, and obviously it's sad, and, we mourn with those who are losing loved ones, but so many more people are actually recovering from the virus.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for kids to know these are people who they were exposed, but they were able to get the help they needed, and they're fine now. And there are many more people recovering than there are dying.
Right.
It's so important for them to know that. And then also, I think, again, in an age-appropriate way, kids need to know some sources aren't reputable. You can't trust what's everywhere. You can't trust everything online.
Correct.
You can't even trust everything that's on the news. Ask the questions.
Yeah.
And let's talk about it. And if I don't know, let's find out together. Let's do some research in a place where we know we can get good information. Or let's reach out to people that we know in real life who are medical or healthcare professionals. And so I think when that happens, kids, it can put their minds at ease, that while we do need to be careful, we don't have to live afraid.
Right. And I think that's such a great suggestion and idea too, because, and I know you probably experienced this with your own teens, but my teens, for example, they will come home and say, oh, well, my friends or kids at high school said this, and they'll tell me what they say. I'll be like, oh my gosh, what? No, you just want to plug your ears, because you can't believe some of the misinformation that they're being exposed to. So I think that's such a very valuable point. And a lot of times, teenagers, they get the information from their friends because they're exposed to them more, and they think that just because, my friend, Bob said it or whatever, it must be true. So what are some ways that parents can kind of combat that, and get their teens to really kind of open up and talk about what they're hearing?
I do a lot of question asking just in general. So what are people talking about? What are your friends saying about this? And then once they share something, if it seems like it's a little bit far-fetched, it might be, what do you think about it? Like, do they believe it? So that we can start where they are with the information. It's like, I'm not really sure what to believe. And then maybe take it to, where these are the facts as we know them. Make sure we have, I think it's a really good idea for parents to find some of the, readily accessible images that have some of the numbers and the statistics and percentages, so that they know for sure, because some of our teenagers in particular are going to want to know statistics.
Right.
That's just the way their brains work. And so with that being said, we need to make sure that we have available an easy, quick way to say, look, this is where it stands. So your friends may have heard some things and they're repeating things, but it may not be accurate. And that's true for teenagers, adults, everybody.
Because there are definitely some adults out there, you're just like, wait a minute, how old are you again?
Right.
So so that's some great advice. Now, you and I were talking before we started recording about, just China, and the divorce rates are starting to climb. So, and we may be like, oh my gosh, and in a way that's funny, but not so much funny. Obviously with, adults being quarantined, husbands and wives and whole families being cooped in their house, what are some ways that husbands and wives or spouses in general can, kind of help cope and get through the time being all under the same roof all day long, whereas they're not normally used to doing that?
Right. I keep saying this, but check in with asking, how's it going? How you feeling? That is so important, because I think, especially for those of us, when you're juggling lots of things, you get going, you get on autopilot, and you just assume if nobody's saying something's wrong, nothing's wrong.
Right.
But I think checking in, how's this going? I know you really appreciated this part of your job. You're not getting it. Anything I can do. It's really important to check in that way. And it's also important that couples have the kind of relationship where they can each say, hey, I kind of need some alone time. Can I, I'm going to go take a walk. I'm going to go and watch this video on my own. Is that okay? And giving each other the space to sometimes just breathe and be, by yourself, have some, because while we're in the home, we're kind of isolated from the general public.
Right.
If you're married or in a committed relationship, that isolation is with that other person all the time.
Right.
And sometimes you do just need a breather. And then
I think making sure not to get offended too, right? When they ask for that personal time.
Right. Okay. And letting them know this isn't, this is just me needing a little bit of time. It's not that I'm not enjoying the time with you. I just also need some time kind of by myself to do my own thing for a minute. Because typically in many folks' work days anyway, they have time alone, either at their own desk, in their office, where they're working in a
or en route while they're commuting from places.
Yeah, that's good. So I think remembering that is good for couples to do. I think it's also on the flip side of it. Yes, some time alone may be good for couples. It's also important for couples to try to do some things that make each other feel loved and special. I'm not sure where I saw it, some report or a couple was interviewed and they had an anniversary, so they just got really dressed up, put on makeup, did all the things, they got champagne, and they had a celebration at home.
Yeah.
And I think you don't have to have an anniversary to do that. Right. You can decide, we've been in our PJs every day for the last 2 weeks. Let's take off the PJs. Let's look good and smell good.
Try on my real clothes. Make sure they still fit.
Exactly. Yes, that part. Make sure they still fit. And yeah, do some, just have fun with each other, because it's a trying time. And I think any special effort that we put forth for our loved one is going to be appreciated. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
And then what are your thoughts on maybe, even starting some new activities or hobbies together? Yes. Because I know obviously, before all of this happened, people lived their life so fast. They were up in the morning getting kids to school, they were at their job, they were doing their job, and then they left, and then they went to pick up kids, and it literally was moving so fast. Yeah. And a lot of times we always say we wish we had more time. Exactly. If only we had this time. Yeah. So what are some ideas or thoughts on, maybe couples starting, new hobbies or activities together, or maybe families, starting new hobbies or activities together?
Yes, scrapbooking is a really good way for families to even take if they've got pictures. I know a lot of us, all of our pictures live in our digital cameras or our phones or whatever. But if, like me, you have some pictures from everything digital, this is a good time to get those in photo albums and scrapbooks. It's a good time to make vision boards. I know my kids, especially my daughters, like to do things like, make collages and vision boards, and, just cut out things in find old magazines, if I get it right, newspapers, whatever the case may be. And it can increase kind of the positive anticipation of what's going to happen next.
Right.
Board games are also in.
Well, but just real quick though, for those who don't know what vision boarding is, and so it's if you want to set any sort of goals, if you have any sort of milestones that you're wanting to achieve for yourself, what are some other good words? It's basically a way to put together ideas of things that you want to accomplish in the future.
And it's motivating. It typically you see these things and it makes it kind of real for you because you're looking at it on a regular basis, and it helps to really move towards these goals because
it's right there in your face. Kind of help with accountability.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I attended some vision board parties in the past. My friend, she does them every Christmas, right before New Year's comes, or she'll do it like right when it's at New Year's. And it really helped me to have it right there, and I accomplished pretty much everything on the board. Yeah, and so I think that's a great suggestion that you brought up to do that, because maybe a lot of people may have missed out or maybe didn't know about them, that they existed. So that's a great idea. So.
And with this happening, I think some people are having to just push some reset buttons because we don't know how long this will be in this particular state. So that means some goals you have had to push pause. So that means maybe a new vision board with a new timetable or whatever the case may be can be really good. For those who are creative, I know in my house, several of my children play instruments. So making music together, singing together can be a good thing to do.
You might come out with a whole new album.
Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, it's fun to hear. I've got one upstairs on a guitar and singing, one across the house on his drums. I had a keyboard in the house. So those kinds of things can be really, really enjoyable for families to do. And we have the time, so why not? I told my kids the other day, I'm going to get a Twister game. So even some of the silly games, some of the board games, those are things I think families have gotten away from in this digital age that we're living in.
Right.
I think it can be really good for entire families as well as just for couples. There are different games that couples can play. I'm trying to think. There are even some games that can actually add to the romance for couples to play as well. So I don't think there's a shortage of games like that. It's just a matter of thinking that, hey, everything doesn't have to be digitized to be
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable, and the things that we do in real life tend to be much more memorable, and they affect us in a much more positive way.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, and I think you bring up a very good point too, because while there may be a lot of negative surrounding the global pandemic that we're
Right.
in right now,
Mm-hmm.
I think in a way when you really kind of put it into perspective and look at the optimistic or the bright side of it, you
Mm-hmm.
see that this time really has enabled people to come closer together,
Right.
because with everything being so digitalized, with everything being so technologically advanced, people literally live in their phone. You will see
Right.
people at dinner together and
Yes.
they'll both be in their phones.
And they're not looking at each other.
Exactly, and having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Now you see so many more people outside, walking, enjoying
Right.
time together, enjoying nature.
Right.
And so I think in a way it almost did, kind of make people
Mm-hmm.
reset or kind of bring back into focus what's really important. So I
Right.
think you bring up a very good point with that.
Right.
And so also when we talk about, a lot of the conversation has been centered around, what kids and teens can do to kind of cope with what's going on, but all of this talk really has been, if you have, excuse me, I don't want to necessarily say normal family, but if you have
Right.
like a regular typical family
Right.
setting, we know that even in the best of times, we can be stressed and stuff like that. Now, what are some ways, let's say, for example, if you know somebody that might be in an abusive relationship, or maybe there might be a child that's in abusive relationship or neglect, we know that with the kids being out of school, that school time may have been their only release.
Right.
It may have been their only
Right.
outlet, their only safe environment. Now they're forced to be in this, abusive home full time. So it's going to be kind of a two-part question. One, what are some things that kids can do to cope if they're in a home that maybe, a parent or a guardian is either emotionally, physically, verbally, or mentally abusive? And then the second part of that will be, what are some things what the spouse can do if the spouse is experiencing any type of verbal or emotional abuse? And then, how can the parent also help that child cope too? So I know that that's a lot to unpack at once,
Yeah.
but I think that is an overlooked population
Absolutely.
that's kind of being hidden right now.
Absolutely.
How can we help those individuals?
Well, first, I have to say, if for any kids who are in abusive situations, the abuse hotline is still up and going. Florida Abuse Hotline. I think if a child if they are in danger of physical, sexual abuse, certainly make those phone calls. There is, I know we have the Refuge House here locally. They still have counseling ongoing as well. So those are some resources that we have access to. But I think so often we talk a lot about the physical and the sexual abuse, and we want to make sure those kids and those spouses are certainly protected and that they have those resources. But what often gets, it's like in a gray area, is the, you mentioned, verbal and mental and psychological abuse. And these are kind of things that when you're stuck in the home for long periods of time can really be, it can just, add to the anxiety and the depression that, family members may already be dealing with. So for children in those situations, it can really prevent their ability to focus on any schoolwork that they may have.
Right.
And when we talked earlier about structure, forget that. If they
Yes.
can't, you know what I mean? If they're not able to even feel safe. Safety, obviously, physical safety is of, paramount. We want to make sure that our families are physically safe. And again, we have Refuge House, the domestic violence hotline, and the Florida abuse hotline. But the emotional safety is not something that a lot of people know how to talk about.
Right.
So a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier about asking the questions and listening and sharing that, I'm struggling to, those things don't happen typically when a parent is not emotionally healthy or when a caregiver has their own emotional stuff. So this is a home where kids may not be in danger of physical violence or sexual violence, but they could very well be in danger of not having their emotional needs met.
Right.
And what we know is that can cause problems indefinitely down
Right.
the road. So,
But too, it's so important that they are emotionally strong right now
Right.
because of all the uncertainty,
Yes.
because of the confusion about what's going on. So it's so important, that they are cared for emotionally. And
Yes.
so if they're not, then
Yeah.
what can that lead to, and how
Yeah.
can the parents help them?
I know of a situation where a parent has, because there's shared custody in one home, the children are exposed to a lot of healthy conversation and, they know they have emotional support and there's, flexibility when necessary. But in the other home with the other parent, that's not so much the case, that there is a lot of risk for verbal and mental abuse. So one of the things that that parent and I have talked about is ensuring that when the children go to the other parent's home, that they have a lot of their own activities. First, just when they're on their own, things that they can engage themselves with and kind of keep things as level as possible so that nothing, so that there's lower risk of triggering some of that bad and unhealthy talk. Also, making sure that kids have on speed dial those people that are safe in their lives, the other parent, if grandparents, other supportive adults, because there may come a time when that child, when those children may need to be picked up, and they may need to be transported to a safer place. Um, Having special rooms and spaces in the home where a child can go, where it's kind of known this is their alone time. This is where he or she will relax and kind of maybe even have some relaxation strategies and breathing exercises, stretches even that can help them to calm down. And a very specific strategy that is common for people dealing with folks who are highly likely to demonstrate unhealthy verbal interactions in particular and emotional interactions is called going gray rock. And gray rock is when you know that you're in the presence, and this is something adults can do, but older children can employ this as well. When you know you're in the presence of someone who has a history of being toxic emotionally, if they begin to elevate or escalate, you begin to take it in the other direction.
Right.
And rather than if the person is, why aren't you doing, rather than I'm trying, it's more of a, what would you like for me to do? And you take a lot of the emotion out of your voice and you don't escalate with them, and it begins to decrease the chances that they're going to keep going because they have nowhere to go.
Sure.
And they're not being supplied with the emotional stuff that they want that keeps them going. So that's one of the most well-known methods for de-escalating when you're in a space where you can't leave and get away from a toxic person, to just make it so that they have nowhere to go with it, and they just give up and then they go do something
because they see that they're not having any influence or impact on you. That's a great idea.
And it's important for caregivers who are healthy to even show children how to do that. Like it's not being rude, because that can be triggering. It's not being disrespectful. It is literally being as flat as you can be to avoid any type of feeding of this toxic emotional energy.
Yeah, which I know is so important, especially like I know for narcissistic personalities, that's one of the things, to have that control, to have that manipulation and stuff like that. So you bring up some very great points, and that's good. So is there anything else that you would recommend for families during this time to just really be able to kind of get through this, like some different coping mechanisms, or anything else that you just want to say to make sure to kind of keep in mind?
Yeah. I think, as a therapist, I'm always telling my clients how important it is to journal in one way or another. And, for some people that is having, the first recommendation is to have a book that you're writing in where you're unplugged. Some people prefer having some of the journaling apps, but whatever the case may be, I think it's important for family members to have the ability to get their thoughts and their feelings out, even if it's in a picture. It doesn't even have to be words. It can be, kids may want to draw different figures and superheroes and whatever it is that make them feel good or kind of express. Maybe it's an angry superhero because they're feeling angry, and then maybe they can share that with their parents, and it's a conversation starter. So I think that's important. I think exercise. And I know we hear a lot about that anyway, but certainly now, because I saw it on social media the other day, I need social distancing from my refrigerator, from the entire kitchen is where I need social distancing from. So get moving, and there's so many online, that's where obviously the digital stuff is really, really valuable. There's so many online sources where we can just log on to YouTube, and you've got yoga, you've got, HIIT, intervals, and all these things that can get your heart pumping, because that so often can get rid of some of the nervous energy and, help you to get the positive endorphins going and then have a good day. I say get it going in the day, because I think for me, getting that exercise in early really makes my day go better.
It does, and it jumpstarts your metabolism too. So if you have problems
go.
social distancing from your refrigerator,
that part.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many, fitness experts who have really been trying to connect with the community, because they understand that their clients cannot come into the studios, and so now I think more than ever, there's so much opportunity to really log on and see some really great,
Right.
videos, tutorials, some different sessions. If you don't like one, try another one.
Yes.
And I definitely think what you were saying, getting it started in the morning, because that can
Yeah.
jumpstart your whole day. And then I know too, some people are like, oh, well, I don't have the equipment at home, so I can't do it. But the reality of it is, if you have milk jugs, you can do it.
Exactly.
If you have, cans of like dish
soup or
detergent,
or whatever,
yes.
you just use what you got.
I was going to say soup, but I was like, soup may be a little bit light for those people who are trying to do like the hardcore.
That's true. For those who want something, I like the
right,
the
your bag of
detergent.
potatoes or something like that. Yeah, and so I think those are some great ideas. And then just know too that you definitely can do some exercising in your living room or in your bedroom.
Absolutely.
So just to recap on some things that we were talking about today. So one, making sure you're keeping that communication open. It's so key. It's so important. Making sure you're talking to your spouses. How are you doing? Checking in, seeing if there's ways that you can help. Making sure you're talking to your kids, checking in with them and asking questions. Don't just take those closed-ended answers. Oh, I'm fine. Oh, yes, no. Make sure you're asking open-ended questions. Engage in your routines, but have flexibility with those routines where necessary. Absolutely. And then making sure that you're also engaging and taking time to enjoy new activities together, new hobbies together, and exercising. Yes. So does that about sum everything up?
Good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so thank you so much for being here,
for
everybody. Dr. Cicely Walker Brantley. All of her information is going to be tagged on this video, so please feel free to follow her as well. Reach out if you have additional questions. Again, we want to make sure that everybody is safe and healthy. Wash those hands. Don't touch your face. I know she and I are both doing it, but that's because we're outside and it's like bugs.
Right.
But from us to you all, stay safe. Thank you so much.